Alright guys, the snorkel is more or less done, so I'm going to show you how I did it. Feel free to give me all the constructive criticism and hate you want, but this is the right way to do it. So, here's the air box on the Wolverine X4. You'll see that there's some PVC in here, okay? This air filter is massive. Big foam filter, oiled, single stage foam filter, right? Here, why is it single stage? Because there's also a paper filter down there. Now, what do we not like about this air box? Well, it's kind of like a brute force air box. Any water that gets in there only has to go up this very small lip to get into the intake pipe. But to get into the engine, it's got to go through a giant plenum secondary air box. So water's not going to flow straight into the engine like with a brute force, but not ideal for splashing around. So in order to do that, we need a special snorkel top, which is somewhere. I'll show you in a second, to keep water from getting into the air box. Once it gets in here, it's going to get into this pipe that flows down and around. So that's your air box. Your air box lid has this goofy oval outlet on it. I say goofy because it's just hard to snorkel, right? See the oval? The oval comes up there. If you take the oval and you cut the lip off the very front of it, cut off a 1/4 inch, you can stretch a 2 inch to 3 inch, right, see? 2 inch, 3 inch, rubber thing from Home Depot over it. And then put the hose clamp, and then actually you can't see it, but I put some ultra gray in there to just make sure it's tight because there's not a lot of pressure right here and here because it's an oval. Then I go to a piece of pipe, then I go to a vent 90, and when you put your air box on, if you do all this right, you realize that that vent 90 you put sits right on top of this nice rubber coated metal bar. That is a great thing to mount the snorkel to. It also holds the battery in. So you can, I just put a big plastic zip tie around there, a big fat one, or alternatively, you can put a hose clamp, okay? So that isn't going anywhere. Boom, snorkel's mounted. Also, with this placement, you realize I did not cut anything except for this cheap hood. So it's very easy to go back to factory or whatever you want to do later. You didn't cut an expensive piece of plastic that's hard to change. So to get it to fit over here right, it's a little tricky. So you can see that I heated this up a little bit from the inside or whatever. Okay, now for the magic part. This is an ARB snorkel top. Not really ARB, it's just a knockoff. Obviously there's white pipe right now. Black pipe is on order. Amazon just kind of screwed me and it's here late, of course. So it's not super sturdy right now because I don't have that clamp on there. But what I did was I put the 3 inch pipe all the way into the top of there. So what that means is any water that gets in here has to go into here, fill this up, then go in the top of the pipe. Most of the water will drain out of these flutes. So this is when you're driving down the road and rain's coming in here, it hits the outside of the pipe and it drains out of these 4 slots. So that right there is a water filtration, system to keep a lot of water that splashes in there out. I didn't go too high with it because this is not the razor. The razor's for real deep shit. This is for just protecting the motor kind of stuff. But I wanted to get the snorkel where I could see it, because now when you're inching into the water, you don't have to guess, ooh, how far is the water splashing up into here, etc., etc. Doesn't look too bad. So I can zoom out anymore, I can't. It is kind of in the passenger's view a little bit, but that's what they get for being a passenger. But I mean, that's pretty high. If you actually look at where that pipe sits in here, so you can go and water that deep, that's nipple height. If you compare that to the snorkels on that or the Rubicon, it's actually pretty high. Also, there's no lift or tires on it yet, so it's going to get even higher. So that's what I did for the engine intake. Now, why didn't I take a pipe and run it up here next to the roll cage real pretty and all that stuff? 2 reasons, flow and noise. So a 2 inch pipe is too small. You're going to lose flow with a 2 inch pipe, so I use 3 inch pipe. If you ran 3 inch pipe up the roll cage, that's all you would see. And noise. This is pretty far away from the driver's head. If you run it up the cage, it's right next to the driver's head. I do not want to hear intake noise. This is one of the quietest side-by-sides ever made. It's not like a whiny-ass razor, right? It's quiet. Let's keep it quiet. Keep the noise away from the driver. Sounds like a whiny complaint, but everyone I've snorkeled their bikes and I do this kind of stuff for them, they really appreciate not listening to that intake noise. So it's quiet, and because it's 3 inch pipe, it's also more quiet because there's not a ton of air velocity going through that pipe. It speeds up once it gets in the airbox and intake track, so you really don't notice a lot more noise. This also cuts down the noise a little bit. Now the belt exhaust, that's the lowest thing from the factory. That's what I decided to do with the belt exhaust. So it comes up here and flows down here. Now why did I do it that way, right? I could have just done one 3 inch pipe up here and had a head right here. Well then, so there's 4 reasons. So if you do that, you go up here like I did with the razor. Because this has seats back here, you'd be blowing hot, nasty, sandy, rubbery belt air on your passengers, which is just kind of rude and unprofessional. Okay, so that's reason number one. Number two is heat. You'd be blowing heat on your passengers. Number three is also heat. This belt exhaust flowing back into here goes into a shroud that helps all the exhaust heat flow out the back of the side-by-side as you're driving. This is something Can-Am's been doing for a while, and now I'm seeing other manufacturers do it, is you use the belt exhaust to carry away the engine exhaust heat. Belt exhaust is hot because it just cooled off a belt. Nowhere near as hot as the air around the headers. So it's a pretty effective way to use that airflow twice. So this air comes through there, cools the belt, and then it cools the exhaust and keeps it cooler back here with passengers. So you really want to maintain that flow. Another reason you want to do it this way is noise. If you have this pipe sitting right here, all four people in here, all you're going to hear is belt noise. Wow, 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 wow. This is a nice thick silicone high temp, what do they call it, a 180 or a U fitting. And this is nice thick, Schedule 40 3-inch pipe. Not a whole lot of noise. Now you could have done 2-inch pipe and saved a lot of space, but again, if you went to 2-inch pipe, you'd be sacrificing a ton of belt flow. The exit on, this is the stock belt snorkel. As you can see, it's not very high. It just comes and blows on the exhaust. That's bigger than 3-inch pipe. That's like 3.5-inch pipe, and it's thin wall. So I did lose a little bit of flow, even going with the 3-inch ABS, right? Not really, because it gets a little smaller here and at the outlet, but so I pretty much kept the same flow. To make it fit into the stock boot, what you do is you put a piece of 3-inch coupler on the end of your pipe. Here's the coupler. So when you do this, that diameter fits into the factory boot pretty easily. I used a 3.25-inch inner diameter rubber thing here. Probably should have used 3.5 for ease of installation. You can see how the pipe's kind of stretched and it makes a little bit of a bitch to put together. And then you basically just cut 2 holes, stick it in the factory boot, and you're done. All 4 of the cup holders are still functional. Really doesn't get doesn't cut down on passenger legroom at all. It fits off to the side. Some passengers like to rest their foot there. Little short passengers, sorry, you can do that on the other side now. But it keeps the heat away from the passenger, the noise, and it maintains the factory cooling that the belt was intended for. Now you're probably wondering what I did with the belt intake. Well, that's a great question. From the factory, the belt intake's already pretty high. That's your belt intake right there. This up in here. So I opted not to mess with it. Why did I opt not to mess with it? Well, it's already pretty high. If I put it any higher, I'm gonna have to listen to it. And belts are noisy. The belt intake's not as loud as the belt exhaust, but I did not want to listen to it. So I'm leaving it there. That's pretty freaking high already. It's very splash proof. It's shielded nicely. I'm not gonna worry about it. If I get a little water in my belt, that starts to be an issue, whatever, maybe I'll raise it up and maybe I'll run it, off to the side of here and do like 2 little stacks right here or something. But I didn't want to do anything that would reduce my belt cooling, because this has a ton of belt cooling on this thing, like a side-by-side should, because that belt's actually rejecting a lot of heat because it's moving at 1,600 pound vehicle. So that's how I decided to do it. Just raise the intake up. This is the crucial one. If you get water in your engine, you're done. If you get water in your belt, eventually you're going to wear the clutches out and all that stuff, but not the end of the world. So I'm not raising the belt intake. I raised the belt exhaust because it was way too low. Raised it up to about shoulder neck level. And because it's a P-trap, even if that does go under for a minute or two, it's not going to be disastrous, especially if you're in low range turning some revs. There's a good bit of air flowing out of it. This thing has a very big belt fan on it, on the secondary pulley, so it's pretty good. Also, I did some research and found out that the gear ratio on this thing, the gear ratio is very low, like I said. The belt ratio is not that low, and that's because Yamaha doesn't want to have they want to keep a lot of belt contact on the primary pulley, so the primary pulley is actually pretty big and doesn't let the belt go all the way down. So if you put a machined sheave on here, you can get a way lower ratio on these things. So all things considered, it's actually not geared that much lower than the T-Rex if you include the belt ratio. But because the gear ratios are way lower, that means the belt has less stress on it, better belt life and everything like that, which is why you got a 10-year belt warranty. But the low range is about the same as the T-Rex. Correction, reverse is still way lower, even though the T-Rex has a lower gear ratio on the belt drive. But we'll see how it does. I got the tires in today. Those are the 28-inch wides. They're 33 pounds. These are the 28-inch skinnies, Maxilla. I need to weigh them. I haven't weighed them yet. Had to blow out the trailer tire to get a new trailer tire. But I'll weigh those and I'll post them in this video too. News on the vent line. So there are 4 vent lines in here from the factory. These 2, transmission, front diff. The clear one is your fan. 5 vent lines. You can only see 2 of them or 3 of them from the outside. Once you pull this, there's 2 more you find. So let me go with it again. Clear one is your fan. Front diff, rear diff. This big thick one is your gas tank, and this one that's just kind of hanging out down here, This is your Radiator Overflow. I wasn't sure if it was snorkeled or not. It turns out it is, which is very nice. So that goes to your radiator. This runs actually up there and gets snorkeled. So pretty cool. You can see that the intake path is real long. There's that big old plenum. And then that intake pipe runs down and all the way back up in the air box. There's your belt breather. You can see it actually makes a Y right there. I don't know if you can, but there's a Y right there, and it goes on to the crankcase for the belt, and then it goes on to the other side of the belt box. So this is my gas tank breather. As you can see, mine just comes out of my gas tank, goes into a copper barb fitting, and goes straight up to the dash. That needs to be deleted. What it used to go through is all this crap. So it used to go into a T, and then some of it would go into this evap canister, and then that would go down to this one-way valve that was on the very bottom of the machine, just from running around the hole pole that's already had muddy water in it. So as soon as this one-way valve fails, you're going to get water in your gas, the way this thing is set up. They all come this way. It's an EPA thing, charcoal canister, whatever. I'm deleting all this shit. So from the charcoal canister, it actually goes over to these little solenoids on top of the engine, and it would get injected into the intake manifold. It's a little red plug. That's where I plugged it off. So I deleted all that crap. Not so much because I hate the environment, but because when you ride water, water gets in that shit and causes you a lot of problems. So you can see right there, I left all the solenoids, left it all hooked up as far as going into the intake manifolds and stuff. But it's just not going to get any fumes to breathe on, which will be fine. And it won't throw any codes because I left everything plugged in. If I had to look at those damn solenoids, I probably would delete those too, but I don't see them, so I'm going to leave them. But yeah, so it looks a lot cleaner down here. That's where the canister used to mount to this bracket right there. So I'm going to pull that bracket out just to keep it as clean as possible, get rid of that little guy, and now everything is snorkeled properly. So you'll have 5 vents up here and 1 vent in the rear for the rear diff. Crankcase obviously breathes in its own intake tract. The vent line for the rear diff, I found the easiest way to do it was it's already ran up to here in this hole, so I just took it and ran it up here next to this harness up into the fender. There's already a little hole right here, don't have to cut anything. That's the vent line, and it runs into the very top of this. So as long as my passenger's head's out of the water, that'll be fine. All the front vent lines are at the very top part of this right here, and I think that's plenty high enough. I'm not really worried about it. This thing's not going to be going that deep, I hope. And if you get a little water in your diff, not the end of the world. The main thing is keeping the water out of the engine oil and water out of the cylinders. So gas tank vents obviously are massively simplified. Yeah, but it looks really good with these tires on there. You can see it's sitting a little high in the back, so just had it jacked up, but I'm hoping that's where it'll sit with the 3.5 inch lift, which apparently is only a 2 inch lift. That also didn't come in because eBay screwed me, but it looks pretty good. Oh, I also got this cool rope, Amazon, like 40 bucks, called a Ditch Pig kinetic recovery rope. We'll see if I break it or not. It's a 20-foot big pulley for the winch. Those are a must-have for side-by-side. If you get real buried, you got to pull a truck out. And I ordered that storage box, but it didn't come in yet, so that kind of sucks. These don't line up very well ever since my cousin flipped it. Thanks, dude. But yep. Oh, by the way, talking about flipping, I don't think I've made a video about this yet. So the whole cage is bent slightly that way. It's hard to see with the phone. You might be able to, oh yeah, you can tell. Yeah, the whole cage is tweaked that way pretty bad. So I ordered new support bars for here and the center support bars, and then I'm probably gonna have to loosen it up, do some heating and maybe a little bit of shimming, get it straight again. It's not weakened structurally. This cage is probably about as good as the P1000 cage, meaning it's not a very good cage, but it's very functional. All the seat belts bolt well. They're nice stretchy seat belt mounts and everything, so I'm gonna keep it. I'm not gonna do an aftermarket cage or anything stupid like that, but it is a little tweaked, which kind of makes me mad. Got the Aztecs unmounted because I needed the wheels, and then my other wheels come in next week. I'll have to put them back. My other wheels are 8 inch in the rear, so see the tires are a little ballooned right now. Hopefully when I put on the 8s, it'll stay flatter. These front ones look nice and flat on a 7. Pretty wide tires really though, and that's 10 psi, so it's still pretty flat. I'll probably eventually run less psi because they're beadlocks, but you know, for the time being, when you just mount them, it's good to run a little higher psi for the first ride. But it already looks way better with the tires, and then a little higher off the ground, a little more aggressive. These things look real good. Snorkel's kind of ugly. I'm going to plan to put a piece of pipe over this to sleeve it so it's one constant width. Oh, there's a Dark Vader one of these I really want, but it's 150 bucks. This is the one with the Land Cruiser because the one I ordered, of course, didn't come in time. This is an Amazon like boost tube 180. I can post a link for that if anyone's interested. And the rest is just 3-inch pipe. Obviously, if you want black, order 3-inch ABS from Lowe's.com. Don't use Amazon because I don't even know if it's shipped yet. Amazon kind of sucks for stuff like this. They're great for, you know, little stupid things like earrings, but this kind of stuff, they're pretty lacking. Also, the turbo kit didn't come in. It's probably another 2 or 3 weeks out, but this thing needed a little more power, so got a little something hooked up back here. It's all plumbed up, to run the line to it. Mounted pretty easy. That's like the perfect spot for a nitrous bottle behind the seat. That passenger's gonna have a scare.